Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Slane, and I am here with my friend.
Writer Drake Harmon.
Hey, Ryder. Good to be hearing from you. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Just
Good.
woke up, but I'm ready to do this.
Good. Ryder, today we're going to be talking about Charlie Chaplin and his work. You and I, we were not super familiar with some of his films, but we've kind of decided that we wanted to expand our taste in films. So we felt like, hey, why not reverse the clock and go back in time and look at some of the most important filmmakers throughout history. And starting with Charlie Chaplin, we decided that, hey, you know what? He would be a great guy to look at because he's obviously one of the most important filmmakers of all time.
Yes.
He was really famous for doing a lot of silent pictures before what they called talkies came out. So, Ryder, I want to get your thoughts on, based on the three films that we've watched from Charlie Chaplin, City Lights, Modern Times, The Great Dictator. I want to get your initial thoughts in terms of Charlie Chaplin's style. I want to get your thoughts on things that you appreciated about Charlie Chaplin, and just sort of a high level overview. So, how about you give us your thoughts?
I was just surprised with how original Charlie Chaplin was he when he directed, wrote, and composed the music for each one of these films. Like this man was just a legend. He was a genius. Um, this character that he played in each of these films, except for the Great Dictator, called the Tramp.
Right.
You know, he kind of represents like the common man. He's drifting along, just walking along, just kind of just letting things happen to him. Whatever situation he comes across, he just kind of goes with the flow, and it creates this like amazing story. It, that's what blew me away about Charlie Chaplin was his ability to write a good story without the use of any dialogue. Well, except for those time cards that he had to use, just in case you needed to know what the characters were actually saying, so you kind of understood the situation a little bit. Um, I think out of all of those films that I've watched, the one that is probably the most significant of all of them, I had to give into the Great Dictator.
Sure. Okay. Well, and I'm certainly going to want to get your thoughts in terms of why that is specifically with The Great Dictator. Just sort of a little high level overview of Charlie Chaplin's background. He was born in 1889 and he was born in England. So he was actually the son of two performers and an actor and an actress himself. So it's very clear why he went into the performing arts because he certainly had that creative gene in him. Tragically, his father would die before he even reached the age of 10, and his mother would pass away shortly thereafter. And I'm not exactly sure what sort of sickness she had, but Charlie obviously felt like if he was going to make it big, here in the United States was going to be the place to do it. One of the things that I think I've started to appreciate about Charlie Chaplin a lot is the fact that, like you were talking about, it's that wide range of emotion he was able to capture without the use of sound or words.
Yes.
And it's almost as if you didn't even need the words, even though Charlie Chaplin would start, or even though he would direct films way into the 40s when talkies had already been out. It's almost as if he was putting a restriction on himself that almost forced him to be more creative. He was going against the current in terms of where technology was going. So, you know, don't think of him as a James Cameron type, as in where he has to have the latest and most technologically advanced camera in order to create some sort of fantastic image, Charlie would put these rules on him so the film would almost remain more pure. Um, it's almost like he found something very unique in filmmaking that basically made it so you know what, this is film. This isn't a record. This should be an entirely different sort of art form. This should be set apart from any other sort of experience that people have had, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. In terms of films that I particularly enjoyed out of all of them, I would really have to say that overall, Modern Times was my favorite. But
Really enjoy that one. That one surprised me.
right, yeah, yeah, I thought that was really, really amazing. So let's sort of talk about these three films one by one. So we're going to talk about them in order of their release. So starting with City Lights, writer, I want to get your thoughts on City Lights. And you know what? Because we both seen it, let's not worry about spoiling that particular one.
All right. Well, that one moment that I want to point out in that film that was really funny was he comes across this very wealthy man.
Right.
And he's so drunk, but he attempts to commit suicide by hanging himself with a rope and tying it around a rock and just drowning himself in the river.
Right.
The tramp, Charlie Chaplin, tries to stop him, but he ends up in the river himself.
Right. Right. Yeah. He had a really good habit of making so many of the scenes in his films comedic. And it's not like they're just straight comedies. There's often a lot of drama in his films.
Yeah, that moment alone where that wealthy man was drunk and suicidal.
Right.
That that was kind of bold for Charlie Chaplin to kind of touch on that kind of issue, because that's kind of relatable to some people to this day.
Right. Or think about, a moment I would like to point out is the very last scene of the movie when Charlie has, or the tramp character has paid for this girl's surgery, because in the film you have this blind girl, and he's sort of walking along the streets and her eyesight has been rectified, but she doesn't know who he is. And then just by her touching his hand, she sort of has this realization, oh, this is the man that paid for my surgery. And there's so much emotion in the scene that it's extremely sweet, and it's not overacted at all. And it's one of those moments you don't need words to feel the emotion there. And
Yeah.
it's truly a really beautiful scene. And this is one of the reasons why people got to go see Charlie Chaplin films, is so they can appreciate what a wonderful artist this guy was. So talk to me a little bit more about some of your other favorite moments in City Lights.
Yeah. The music, especially, it fits so it was written so beautifully for every scene. You could feel it.
Right. No, totally. Just I love City Lights so much, just because again it just has such a rich balance of the comedy with the drunk man that you were talking about. It has a really rich balance of drama with the blind girl, and the pacing is wonderful. I love the pacing in that film so much, because there's not a dull moment in it.
Oh, no, never.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about Modern Times a little bit. So I want to get your initial thoughts on Modern Times, scenes that really stuck out to you, and just your overall thoughts on it.
It was the very first scene where all of the all of the factory employees were going to work. Before that, you could see a shot of a flock of sheep like running in and out of frame, and
Right.
then it fades to sort of like I guess did it like take place in New York, I suppose.
I'm not exactly sure where the film takes place, but I do know that it's obviously during the Great Depression. The very sort of industrialized, sort of modernized.
Because you could see the factory workers like exiting a subway tunnel.
Right.
That was an interesting shot that stood out to me, and like the symbolism of comparing, these factory workers to sheep.
Right.
That sort of surprised me in a way because, well, in a way, that's sort of what the upper class kind of thinks of the common working man.
The worker bees.
Using them.
Right. Yeah. I thought one thing that stood out to me right away with Modern Times is that it's not a complete silent film. Like there are
the president of the company, he had dialogue.
Right, yeah, but really primarily when he's shouting orders over a video screen. I thought that was particularly interesting.
That itself was sort of futuristic. That the president, he had cameras overlooking what all the workers were doing.
Right,
especially in the bathroom when the Charlie Chaplin's character was trying to have a smoke break and he gets caught. He says,
right,
hey, get back to work.
Right, or when at the very end where Charlie has that big musical number at the end. Right, and he's doing that whole dance. So that was a really fun balance, I thought, of an integration of sound. And what I like about it is it's still a silent movie, but there are these moments of sound in it. And I got to thinking about that, and I said, well, that actually makes a lot of sense because the name of the film is called Modern Times. So perhaps Chaplin was conscience. I can't even say the word. What's the word? Thank you. And he was trying to integrate those more modern elements into the film without them having completely dominate and change the art form that he was trying to perform.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were talking about the symbolism and the conveyor belt scene. I love how very early on in the film you see the president of the film being introduced to this sort of like automated way to feed the factory workers while they're like hammering and stuff.
Coincidence, Charlie Chaplin was the guinea pig to test out this new invention.
Right.
And when it gets completely haywire and it just starts smacking Charlie Chaplin in the face, that was one of my favorite moments.
Oh, I mean, it was so great because just like it's like these Dr. Seuss hands like feeding him and like they're like scooping soup into his mouth, and it's almost like it's trying to point out like how stupid and just ridiculous and just how because the whole reason they're introducing this piece of equipment is so the workers don't have to take breaks.
They could just keep being productive and the company would make more money basically.
Right, they're just worker bees. They're purely there to be sheep and help the president make money. Absolutely. Yeah, and I loved the use of the big gears and the shots of the big machines, and how Chaplin gets caught in the gears and he sort of has to snake around. I mean, I can't even imagine the labor that went into building some of those things. It's really incredible to think about.
Yeah. Another thing that I want to point out from that film is
right.
Some of the characters' quirks, like Charlie Chaplin's character. He's basically like using these two wrenches. He's twisting bolts on metal plates, but he's been doing it for hours, so he has this like uncontrollable like Tourette's twitch. When he's He has to like come back to reality.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I feel like this film, more than any of them, really highlighted Chaplin's physical abilities. And what I mean by that is that it's almost like, I mean, I know he was a performer before he got into pictures, and so it wouldn't surprise me if he was involved in some kind of dance or something like that. But he just had a way about the way he moved or the way he could move that made his physical comedy just seem so smooth and just have such a you know, because it wasn't about tumbling. It's like if he tumbled, he would like roll back up, or if he um you know, just everything about him. It's like there's a thinking behind every single motion that he performed in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
That's another thing I want to point out is
mhm.
uh, what he just his appearance alone physically. I
Right.
mean, Charlie Chaplin, he's only 5'4".
Yeah.
That he's a short man with a kind of like kind of a thin stature. He was like 165 pounds.
Yeah.
This guy's not intimidating at all. The toothbrush mustache that he has. He also had to wear makeup around his eyes to kind
Mhm.
of bring a lot more attention to his eyes, so his expressions were kind of emphasized a lot more.
They pop.
That in itself is funny. Even his outfit, the baller hat, the way he walked, his large flat foot shoes.
Right.
That in itself is funny. It kind of reminded me of Goofy from Disney.
Yeah. You know, I think one scene in particular that really shows off his physical attributes is the scene where he's basically hired to be a night guard with the love interest of the film, played by Paulette Goddard. Um,
His third wife, believe it or not.
right, and she is watching him skate around blindfolded, and he's skating around, and he's
He's so close to a ledge, but he just misses it by inches, and he almost falls down.
right, but he's still skating so smoothly.
Yeah,
Right. I mean, I love that about Charlie Chaplin. You know, he made things seem easy. Um, Probably another aspect I really loved about this film was all the themes that get brought up with it. You know, the technology, the workers' unions, the fear of him. There's a fear, I think, believe it is, that he's a communist. You know, I mean, just all these different elements that get brought into the film, and
yeah. I think that those rumors caught on to him when he filmed The Great Dictator.
right. You know, I love it how in modern times where it's got this sort of childlike romance going on in it. The actress Paulette Goddard, she was, gosh, she was beautiful. Like yeah, I mean, she was such a good actress, and the romance is it's childlike, and yet it's believable.
Yes,
You know,
I did believe that.
right? Um, you know, shortly after they become friends and they start talking more, there's a scene where you see a husband and wife, and they're coming out of their house, and Charlie Chaplin's kind of like mocking the two of them and everything. But you know, Chaplin and or the Tramp's character and her, they've basically decided that, you know, we would like to have that one day. So it's also this theme of chasing the American dream that I really enjoyed.
I totally agree with that. I mean, that speaks relevance to what everyone wants today.
Right. Yeah. And I really don't think that movie would have worked unless you had her, because she just had such a wonderful smile that it was so clear why Charlie Chaplin would want to work with her again, because she's also the love interest in The Great Dictator as well. Yeah, so I mean, just so many things to appreciate about Modern Times. I would say out of all the three that I watched, that was the most enjoyable. Um, you know, it's just really helped me appreciate, Chaplin's ability to see films from a sort of a bird's eye view, right? So like you were saying, he had to be the director, he had to oftentimes be the writer, he had to work on the music, as well as act in the film. So just really, there's so much there to be appreciated. So switching gears a little bit with The Great Dictator, let's get some of your thoughts on that as well.
Oh man. Um, Out of the entire film, which most of it I really did enjoy, I love that Chaplin had to play multiple roles in that. He was the Jewish barber,
Right.
and he was the dictator, Adenoid Hinkle.
Right.
Is a satirical parody of Adolf Hitler, who was still alive during that time. And it was before World War II. But the ending was what sold me for the film.
Mm-hmm.
The speech, you could, I can't quite explain it.
Right.
I mean, Charlie Chaplin, that's what kind of solidified Chaplin in the book of cinema history. Just that speech alone was what blew me away.
Yeah. Because this was the first full-length talkie that Chaplin had done, and talkies had been around for quite a while at this point. And that being said, I think it was a sad moment when Charlie Chaplin had realized that his next film was going to be a talkie, because from at least what little I know about Charlie Chaplin, admittedly, there's an interesting scene in the movie Chaplin, played by Robert Downey Jr., where they're discussing doing The Great Dictator, and
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr., when he's playing Chaplin, they basically play it up to where Chaplin says that if the tramp talks, then the tramp is dead. It's like there was this resistance to wanting to have him speak, because that would be the end of a character he seemed to love playing, and that's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, but the Great Dictator was so great because, again, so many of those themes of that are relevant to today, such as or scenes that were relevant at the time. So, for example, the references to Hitler, the ghettos, and the Jewish communities over in Europe. It's almost like when it was made, we here in the U.S. weren't completely aware of what was going on, and this was a innocent or not so violent way of introducing people of the U.S. into what was really going on.
Sure.
I would say what I had to really appreciate about it is the pacing. The pacing feels really good. It really wraps you in from the very first act. I mean, with the whole the battle sequence where
Yeah.
he's charging in with all of his guys, and all the smoke comes in, and then he realizes, oh crap!
He's on the opposite enemy lines.
Yeah, that's so good. Or when they're flying a plane, and he's having stuff fall down in the airplane, but it's because the airplane's upside down. Right. Yeah. So really some amazing technical feats they were able to accomplish with that movie for sure. Talk to me about some more of your favorite moments in that particular movie. Things you really enjoyed about it, and why people should see it.
Well, one scene I want to point out that shocked me was when the stormtroopers.
Right.
That's another thing, though. Stormtroopers, what they called the parodied Nazi soldiers in the film.
That's what they were actually called in.
Well, today when we talk about stormtroopers, it's a reference to Star Wars today.
Hmm.
That's kind of strange.
Well, that term comes from what Hitler called his SS. His
troopers.
Yeah, they were called stormtroopers. Think about Star Wars when you see a lot of the reds and the whites and the blacks. That comes from Nazi colors and Nazi symbolism. That's what George Lucas wanted you to think about. Like, these are the bad guys. So, yeah, but again, talk to me about some things that stuck out to you, or why you think people should go see it.
Well, the one thing I was going to talk about was that was kind of shocking even for Charlie Chaplin to film was when the stormtroopers were about to when the Jewish barber was kind of fighting back against the stormtroopers when they were about to paint on his barber shop.
Right.
But he struggles to fight back against them. They try to hang him from a lamppost, and
mm-hmm.
that kind of shocked me.
Yeah.
Schultz, whom was a comrade of the Jewish barber, comes along and pretty much saves him. Another one of my favorite moments is this chubby general who works for Hinkle.
Is this garbage?
He just invents these ridiculous combat tools,
right?
Such as the bulletproof vest, or
oh my God! Yeah, just so many. And again, it's that wanting to improve or militarize things. Yeah, I love how he's going around and he's calling one of his generals' card called General Garbage or something to that effect. Yeah, and I mean, again, like, you remember how you brought up how he sort of represents the everyman, but he also represents the good guy. So him wanting to stand up and fight against bullies and so forth, and he very oftentimes wants to do the right thing. Yeah, so I mean, we could go on for hours talking about Chaplin, and I really think if people want to appreciate more modern films and they want to gain a deeper appreciation for movies that are coming out today, then they should absolutely indulge themselves in Chaplin's work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to point something else out. I don't know if you've read about this, but the one feature that Charlie Chaplin has that stands out throughout out of all of his physical attributes is his toothbrush mustache that he has.
Right.
That was actually a fashion trend in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
During the 19th century, and over time it spread to Europe and in parts of Germany, it was until Adolf Hitler bore the mustache that the fashion trend ended.
Right.
Just when you see someone who has that kind of mustache, they don't say, "Oh, you look like Charlie Chaplin." They say, "Oh no, you look
like Hitler." Right. But
Yeah.
which is so funny because when you look at the imagery for the posters for the Great Dictator, it's sort of two-sided, right? So that is to say that there is a hat, and there's also a Hitler-like haircut at the bottom. But the thing that's in the center is the mustache, right? So you can turn the case over, and it says, the Great Dictator, and then it says, the Great Dictator on the bottom. And it doesn't matter which way you have it turned. You can read it either way, but it has to do with that duality, how he was playing both characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, Ryder. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us. We'll be sure to review some other films, but definitely, if you all haven't gone to see any of Charlie Chaplin films, you all are missing out, and we highly encourage you to go watch those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely.